All right, so now I want to offer a couple of tips about designing your own. So hopefully you're all super excited by this and you're ready to go start building one of these things. So the first thing I'd say is probably don't do it. It's like almost likely to fail. Almost for sure going to fail. But if you still want to do it, then here's what I would suggest. No, but you should go into it with realistic expectations. Like the way these things are, lots of people come in and they tell stories of like a small number of successful ones, and we know that there are lots of other ones that totally failed. So if you think you're gonna, it's like, oh, I should just start like a social networking site because look how good Facebook is. Like that's not it's not a very thoughtful way of doing things. I'm gonna be a billionaire. So like realistically, you should expect that this will fail, and you should proceed accordingly. So I think the biggest challenge is to motivate the participants. All of these things require participants to make progress. You need to have people excited to do what you want them to do. So some of these projects, the participants come first, and then they sort of wrap the science around the stuff that people are already doing. And some of them, they start with a task and then try to bring participants to it. So Galaxy Zoo, people weren't online already doing these images. Galaxy Zoo had to bring people to this task, whereas like eBird was the opposite. People were already doing birding, and eBird just added on the sort of infrastructure. So they had to do, the motivation work is different. Their motivation work in eBird is to get people to upload the data, not to go out and look at birds. You're gonna get a ton of heterogeneity, and in skills and in interest and in amount of time, and you want to be able to accept all that. So in the same way that wiki surveys are greedy, they take as much or as little as people are willing to provide, you want to be able to think about heterogeneity as a benefit and not as a burden. So a lot of researchers are like, oh, we need to standardize our data, we need to like have tests to make sure everyone is the same. I think you much more want to be open to the heterogeneity and deal with the different levels with redundancy. You want to focus people's attention. This is, again, actually, in some way, I'm now realizing, very similar to the wiki survey stuff, too. So this is very related to the idea of if you treat these people's time as valuable, because these are not cogs, they're collaborators, you want to help them focus on what's going to be most valuable. If they're participating because they want to make a contribution, you want to help them figure out what it is that will help them make that contribution. So if you don't have any structure, it's going to be hard for people to know what they should focus on. Enable surprise. So one of the cool things about a lot of these is that unexpected things happen. So in Galaxy Zoo, they have these great examples of things that bubble up out of the forums that turn out to be very interesting and important, and not the thing that the researcher originally intended. So one of the things, if you have a bunch of smart people working on something for a while, they're going to do stuff you don't expect. And you should want that. And that's, again, about not treating people as cogs, but treating them as collaborators, is enabling them to do stuff that you didn't expect. And that's the difference, I guess, between Turk and a lot of these other things. In Turk, it's unlikely, although not impossible. We got some very nice emails from the Turkers yesterday, where they were actually trying to help us. But a lot of times they're there just to do what you ask them to do. Whereas with the mass collaboration, oftentimes people will do stuff that you didn't ask them to do. And that stuff can be cool. And last, be ethical. So this obviously applies to all research, but mass collaboration creates some different kinds of ethical questions than normally arise in social science research. And so in the book, I try to explain what this means and how we think about it. It just, the issues are a little bit different. And so if you don't think about them consciously, you might accidentally do something you didn't want to do. So this is, again, yeah, so that's be ethical. And, yeah.
So maybe this question is weird, but those, for example, the successful project of the mass collaboration is not shared like your music lab experiment. So that means that maybe the different world, some mass collaboration works very well differently in this world. So that means that I want to know the idea of, I want to learn the mass collaboration itself because I'm interested in the large group of the corporation. Mm-hmm. But are there any evidence are there any scientific evidence of the success of the mass collaboration?
Yeah, so I would say the way that I made this list is the way that you're not supposed to do scientific things, which is like it's based on experience and looking at case studies. There is a separate approach which is based on creating theories and testing those theories in experiments. And a good book about that is by Bob Kraut and some other people. It's called Creating Online Communities or something like that. And that is like very, it's much more formal in its approach, like about motivating participants. So there's like a bunch of different theories about motivating participants, and he designs different experiments to try to compare these theories in different settings. So I would say that book as well takes this kind of other more scientific approach. This is sort of more based on, like I said, what you're not supposed to do. Looking at successful examples and extrapolating from your own experience.
Yeah, the difficulty of such an idea,
Yeah.
even if the description, we can see the successful project or
Yeah.
failed project, but we cannot see the bunch of the failure project.
But I've seen those,
Okay.
and I've actually done some of them. I'll just tell you about very quickly. I tried to create an online game to study cooperation. I worked on it for a year. Total failure. Gone. So, but I learned from that. I'm trying to put that into here.
What's that of the...
Which of these did it
Yeah.
fail? It wasn't fun. Motivating participants.
Uh-huh.
That's the most often reason for failure. By far, the most common problem is people just don't want to do it. So when we designed the Fragile Families Challenge, we thought a lot about how to motivate participants and how to motivate the kinds of participants we wanted, not the kinds of participants we didn't want. But yeah, I think you're right that there's a large stochastic element in which of these becomes successful. And there's a lot of path dependence. So if you look at Galaxy Zoo, now they have Zooniverse. They have tons of these projects. That very easily could have turned out differently, right? They might have never gotten off the ground, but they got off the ground, then they got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think like any kind of thing we would try to learn from these past projects, we have to keep that in mind that there's a large random element in it, and that we're not seeing a lot of the failures. Although I have seen some of the failures. I've been one of the failures. Yeah?
I was curious about the one that failed.
Yeah.
Because I want to learn failure.
Yeah.
Was it an experimental design type thing where typically you might have paid the participants, or was it something where you just really needed such a large number that?
No, it wasn't a large number thing. So I'm kind of not. This is gonna sound extreme, but remember anti-status quo bias? Okay, so I'm kind of against paying participants in experiments. So like the music lab, we didn't pay people. I think ideally you would make something that people actually want to do. That's my goal. I'm not saying it should be everyone's goal, but that's just what I like. And so we tried to create like a video game, a casual multiplayer game that has some mix of cooperation and defection. So you can imagine that that's very much like a lot of these public goods games. And you can imagine that turning into a video game. We tried really hard. The biggest problem with it wasn't fun. People didn't want to do it. I could have paid people to do it, but then I might as well just pay them to a regular public goods game. In which case, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah?
But don't people want to get paid?
People do want to get paid, but that's just not how I like to, I don't know, like, whatever. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay people in your experiments. I'm just saying everyone has to find the kind of thing they like to work on. I personally like to work on experiments where you don't pay people.
But for scientific reasons, you have some priors about what it does to...
I just think, it's not as exciting to me. I don't know. I think I'll talk more about this with experiments, but like, I think it changes what's happening. I guess in the same way that like people prefer field experiments to lab experiments, because people are doing this sort of mixed into their everyday life because they care about it and want to do it. That feels better to me for no scientific reason than people sort of coming and doing this made-up thing outside of their normal way of going about their life. Yeah?
Just a response to that, we often hear this argument when paying incentives to survey respondents that this would kill intrinsic motivation, so maybe it's...
Yeah, it's related to that. Yeah.
This is a question I just want to argue a little bit. It seems
Yeah.
like there really is a scientific reason, and a good one,
Yeah.
in the sense that it could change the participation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool if you make something that people actually want to do, but it also means that you're studying almost like an in vivo behavior. I mean, lab experiments are fundamentally different than field experiments.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But why don't we have lab experiments that are fun that people want to do?
It's really hard to make.
I
fun
know,
things.
maybe that's why I like doing it.
But you might also
I mean,
get
so much
fun. You might get people who are particularly motivated to play fun games rather than.
Same with people. Yeah, I'm not saying, but I want to be clear. I'm not saying there's a scientific reason, but I think we've talked some about like research, right? And what are good research questions? What should you do for your project? So I have certain things that I find fun and enjoyable to work on, and those are the things that I work on more. And I totally, if you love doing experiments where you pay people, then do that. That's great.
I mean, why aren't you saying there's a scientific reason? It seems like there's
Not because that's not why I'm doing it this way. I mean, I'm trying to be honest with you about why I'm doing it this way. I could make up some fancy veneer for why I'm doing it this way, but the honest answer is I just like it better. It limits the kind of things I can do, right? It cuts off a huge class of experiments. But it opens up a different class of experiments. So that's the trade-off. And that's the trade-off I'm willing to make. Other people don't have to make it. And if we all made the same trade-off, then it would be really boring. Right? If everyone was only doing the exact same thing, that wouldn't be good for everyone. So it's great. I think we want people doing them different ways. And then that collectively is better. Yeah?
But is it going to be a concern that if you don't pay people, you will only attract a small subset of population who are not who are not motivated by money, but the majority is motivated by money, right? So your sample will be biased.
Or who have the luxury to not be motivated by money.
When was the last time any of us participated in an experiment to get paid? I mean, when you do pay people, you're getting huge selection bias.
You get selection bias either way.
But
Look, the number of people who like getting paid vastly much larger than the number of people who like playing any video game.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. Perfect transition. Tomorrow we are going to talk all about experiments, and I will now talk about. I'll add some stuff about paying people to what I was going to talk about. So just to wrap up for today, we've talked about mass collaboration. We've talked about, as I was clear at the beginning, this may seem kind of weird and atypical, and that is true. I think it's going to become more important. I think this is going to create a lot of opportunities for us. I see a lot of people thinking about this space in a way that I think is not the right way. So at the beginning, I tried to go through and say, here's how people are thinking about it now. Here's how I think you should think about it. And now we're going to get a chance to all experience this ourselves. So we're going to be in a mass collaboration, the Fragile Families Challenge. So the next step is everyone take a break, get some coffee. Then we'll be back here in 5 minutes, 10:35. And then I'll give you an introduction to the project for about half an hour. And then you'll all work on it for the afternoon. All right? So see you in 5 minutes.